You are a saint.
You say that now.
So it's such an off day.
Alright,
Oh, no.
5, 4,
Let's do this.
3, 2, 1.
Good morning, everybody. Did we bring our pillows?
Yes.
Today you do not need Ambient to fall asleep. We're going over fair housing and advertising. Okay? Celebrating 50 years of it. Yay. If you go onto YouTube, there's some very dry, exciting videos. Dry and exciting. It's like a hot, dry, humid day. Doesn't work. But anyway, let's kick it off with some fun words and what we can and can't use. Are both of these available on Jostle?
They will be.
Okay, so either they are or they will be. But there's the fair housing sheet that looks like this, and then there's the one I like to use, which is from the Oklahoma Press Association, of the words they use and don't use. Going through this, it's probably a good idea to keep it at your computer or somewhere close where you enter in your MLS listings. MLS Pin does a great job. They have a little grammar catcher, but if you do it in New Hampshire, they don't have that. And we're going to look at some examples of things that could get you in trouble. But what are protected classes?
Race.
Disabilities.
Reasons why we can't purposely deny somebody or be prejudiced against them. So yeah, so we've got race, color, national origin, religion, sex, gender, familiar status, disabilities, handicap. I'm going to pause right there. Disability and handicap, it doesn't mean only that you can say, oh, well, I don't want to work with people like that. The properties you show them have to be accessible to them. Mm-hmm. So if you've got somebody in a wheelchair, and they want to look at a second floor condo, I hope there's an elevator in the building. Sexual orientation has been added, as well as gender identity. Go ahead.
Is there a year that applies to the elevator thing? Or
I don't know the answer to that. All I know is that in the sheets you have for today, if anybody doesn't have chapter 2, we can get you a hard copy, or they're also available on Jostle as well. It's only like 8 pages, I think, 9 pages. So, but it says that on page 4 going into 5, it says landlords should never attempt to assess the disabled person's ability or capabilities. Inquiry. I don't know the answer of if it has to be, but in today's way of things going, there's a good chance that somebody will use it.
Super old buildings, you know.
Right. And then gender identity. It's interesting that gender identity's been added here recently, and just yesterday, did anybody see in the news what is going before
Yes.
Congress on? There's now going to be at birth 3 choices.
Yeah, gender neutral.
Gender neutral.
Wow.
On your birth certificate,
On-
it's going to be male, female, or gender neutral. So technically, you do not have a gender, or you lay in between.
Right.
You're not one or the other.
And it's amazing the debates I've been seeing on this, but there's, it is what it is. There's some countries that have had this for years. I think there's something like 27 countries that already recognize gender neutral. It's pretty amazing. So, growing up for me, I was always had to address everybody Mr. or Mrs. That may not be the way to go nowadays. That may not be considered polite. So something to keep in mind. In Massachusetts, there's some additional classes, age, ancestry, national origin, children, familiar status, those are the same. Marital status. You can't discriminate because you have people who aren't married with kids or single mothers or anything like that. Veterans or military status, that was interesting. That's here. And then Section 8. We did cover Section 8 a little bit yesterday. If you're going to do a rental property, it's Section 8, whether you want it to be or not. Okay. There's another big thing about rentals in Massachusetts, and that is discrimination for criminal charges. If they're convicted of a drug dealing offense, you can use that as a reason. If they're convicted for drug use or paraphernalia or anything like that, you can't. And now that they've legalized, legalized recreation marijuana, I don't know how past charges and that kind of thing could play into it. So we'll just have to watch and see how that plays out. Real quick, anybody have you guys done any transactions or started any transactions where the property is going to be used as a farm for marijuana? Okay. Most banks will not touch it, just FYI, because federal funds can't be used for it. So if you have a client that's looking at that, make sure you contact the lender and explain what's going on, because hate to get through the process to find out it's not going to close because the
It's usually
funds
like
aren't there.
cash.
Right, it would have to be.
Because they have to have so much capital to do stuff like that. Like,
Yeah.
residing against the law is like, they have to follow that, so.
Right. Okay. Who does fair housing apply to? Almost everybody. It applies to everybody in the room. Anybody that has a real estate license, it applies to. But a landlord, it doesn't always apply to them. So if you have, I think in Massachusetts, a double occupancy house and the landlord resides at the house, they can make whatever decision they want based on whatever criteria they want. In New Hampshire, it's 3. Federal statute is 4. So if you're in New Hampshire and you have a landlord that wants to rent out 2 of their 3 units, and they say, I'm just going to use race here, I don't want any black people, okay? They can do that if they're going to represent themselves, but we cannot represent them. And if they say a comment like that to you, you have to say, I'm sorry, I can't represent you, and terminate the agreement. But if they want to do it in their yard and put up a sign and do it themselves, there's technically nothing that's in violation there. Again, Massachusetts, I believe it's 2. If anybody knows that differently, correct me, but the last time I checked, that's what it was 2 units. So going from there, the biggest thing is when you're doing your listings, what words can't you use? That's what we're going to focus on for about the next 45 minutes. And I've got some examples up on the screen.
Let's go to my dad. Yeah, I think it's good stretch.
You want to come over here?
Yeah.
It's so great. I love it.
So let's look at this one. Well-maintained house in the country, close to skiing, hiking, fishing, hunting. This tidy home will keep you happy year-round. Anything an issue in this first sentence?
Walking.
Yeah, all the walking and skiing, it's like for people that
Are
are
physically
be active and able to move.
So
Close.
the
A person may not have any legs.
well, they may not.
But
They
yeah,
may
may
not.
not.
But these are pretty descriptive. I don't have a problem with this first.
Well, it's
This
more of
is-
a description of location of the home and what amenities are around it. It's
Yeah.
not so much the property itself.
Right.
So it's not home specific.
Right. So this one, so far we're doing okay. We made it through the first sentence. With 3 bedrooms, a large kitchen, and an expansive living room, this move-in ready house will put a smile on your face every time you walk through the doors.
Oh, walk through.
Yeah.
No,
You
that's-
can't say walk. That, I know you can't say
Yeah, I
walk.
thought I
So you
remember
could-
reading that
You
before.
can't say like walk to town,
Yeah,
walk
close
through.
walk to
You can say
church.
That-
experience,
Right.
enter.
Enter, right. So an MLS pin will kick that out.
Oh, they-
Maybe that's where you were having your issue.
Yeah, okay.
Uh-huh.
So in New Hampshire, this would be fine.
That would be fine.
2 outbuildings provide a place to put your stuff.
Stuff.
Stuff. Yeah. All right. So this one, you have the walking in the second sentence, but
So you really can't say the word walk.
it's going to trigger.
In New Hampshire you can.
Yeah.
In New Hampshire you can, in Mass you can.
Yeah.
Right. So walking distance.
You just have to say
Just
close
say
You can say
close by,
proximity.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So a Google search for synonyms of walking is probably going to be very popular this afternoon. Okay, so this one here, I can see it all on my screen, but you guys can't. Needs some work, but a great opportunity for a starter home. I'm just going to stop right there.
Starter home.
Yeah,
It could be a home for anybody, whether it's their fifth one or their first one.
right.
Yeah.
For 22 acres.
Yeah, 50 grand for 22 acres. It's worth the tear down.
This stuff for sale.
Oh,
So-
my dad lives there, St. Johnsbury, Vermont. That's
Yeah.
funny.
Yeah, I tried to go either New Hampshire or Vermont so that in case there's anybody that knows somebody that has a listing, I try not to.
Try not to find hours. Pick
Mhm.
them apart. Now, question: do these apply to commercial units as well? Is fair housing the same? I mean, as far as like description-wise, anyway, is it the same?
I don't know the answer to commercial.
But I would think it would.
I would think it. I would think it would too.
I would think it'd be more strict
Yeah.
because you're dealing with the public.
Yeah.
Most
But
of
in
the
most things, when you're dealing with a business, you're not dealing with you're dealing with an entity, not a
Yeah.
person.
But if
and
you're
the-
So I
putting
don't know.
descriptive wording in MLS, I would think you need to be very careful, like especially if there's a mixed use.
yeah.
You'd have to be careful of what it is approved to be used for at the moment,
Yeah.
and then what the potential might be, you know.
And what they are or are not allowed
Yeah.
to do with it, yeah. I only ask because I have a commercial listing and now I'm gonna go look at the description.
Mm.
Nice.
So while you guys read this one and see what you think about that, I'm going to do some research here.
Oh, already,
Family.
great neighborhood,
Mhm.
that's judgmental.
Well, you can put in great neighborhood though,
You can't talk about family.
but you can't say family. Yeah.
Preferring and entertaining. Yeah, I guess so.
I heard, I don't know if this comes under, I don't think it comes under fair housing. It might. I heard that you can't use, lingo like safe neighborhood. This crime could happen anywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So you
that's
can't
true.
really
And then
talk
you're
about
not being a source of the source for finding out what the crime rate is in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
So there's nothing that I'm finding in here that discusses the commercial aspect of things. But what I am seeing is that the agency in charge of the agency in charge of enforcement is HUD, so Housing and Urban Development. We'll do a Google search here in a second. And
Yeah, I'm just curious because, I mean, commercial is so much different than residential as far as where it lies and the uses and things like that. And you're never really using that word family or anything like that.
Right,
You know, no
that's
family
true.
room, blah,
Yeah.
blah, blah.
all right.
This guy's just gonna have us all on eggshells after.
I know.
This is going right
Hey.
up on my computer.
My listing Pat is writing on the listing.
Yeah.
The remarks, yeah, it takes me hours. I like go back and it doesn't sound right.
Me and Courtney were doing
Oh,
this
it's
yesterday,
so
kept
hot.
kicking her back.
Oh,
And we couldn't figure out what it was.
So this neat as a pin bungalow here. Perfect for someone downsizing, just starting out, or looking for a second home.
Well, those are
That's
all
another
targeting
thing.
specific things. You
Yeah.
can't-
They tried to be all inclusive, I think, but
They're definitely
yeah,
trying to.
it's
But what if you own 4 homes?
right.
Someone could say.
Yeah.
So you can't say downsize.
No, not downsizing or upsizing.
You
Can't say.
Because you're targeting specific.
What you will
criteria.
find out there is the term right sizing.
Okay, okay.
So
Oh, that's a good word.
I didn't make it up.
So you can't target really anyone in your.
No,
design
no, no,
At
no.
all.
No, you have to be able, you have fair housing, you have to include everybody.
You can't say first time buyer.
No, you have
No.
to include, no, you have to.
I mean, you
have to
see it
start
all the
home.
time.
Marketing, we were trying to target a certain.
Yeah.
demographic.
So what happens when they list like this?
Perfect for
When
downside.
the
Well,
realtors list like
like-
this,
So-
they get called out?
No, I think
So,
Yeah.
hold on a second here, guys, because there's a bunch of us, plus we have the live stream, so we'll try to channel all the questions. And one of the questions that was just asked was, what happens when people do this? Well, just like anything else, if nobody reports it, nothing happens, right? So it's kind of like the Realtor Code of Ethics. Who's in charge of enforcing that? Us. We're self-governing. So if, but let's say somebody does see this and they file a complaint. If you go to page 7, it talks about your civil penalties. Your first offense is $10,000. So let me ask you a question. Do you think you're going to make $10,000 commission on a $50,000 listing here?
No.
Now, I went to the low end of the spectrum here too, but we see it on every price point. So, second offense within 5 years, 25 grand, and then 50.
So how is that handled? Like you get fined and then what? Your broker pays it, you pay your broker, or?
That's a question for Stacy. My guess
I would
is
think
no.
It's a personal charge.
Yeah, it's a.
In that sense.
Now, also keep in mind that if there's a complaint here, there's probably going to be a complaint at the commission, and when there's a complaint at the commission, the broker has to go, the managing broker has to go, and the agent has to go. Now, I can tell you that Stacy is covering her butt right now because we're all in here learning about fair housing, so you've all been warned. So when she goes before the commission, she can say, no, we did this training, go to our YouTube channel. When you go before the commission and they say, have you had this training? And you can say, no. And they said, well, you should have gone to your YouTube channel. Okay? So that's the consequence of doing it. Not to mention that you could lose your license and all of that happy stuff
I
above
was
and
gonna
beyond.
say, at what point, like, if, they go as far as a third offense, at what point could you potentially lose your license? Could it be the first time around? Could it just be whatever they decide is fitting for the situation?
Right, it's what the commission decides at that point. And the other thing is, if there's a commission violation, that means there's probably a code of ethics violation. Code of ethics means maybe the commission says, okay, we're gonna give you a warning or put you on probation or whatever. Your local board though could say, nope, you can't use the realtor designation anymore. And then if you're in an office like ours where everybody's required to be a realtor, you're looking for a new home. So the consequences can be pretty severe.
Yeah. So probably the best thing is to just describe the house, the property, just a little
Try not to.
bit, go into a lot of those other
It's-
things.
Well, it's funny because you read through some listing descriptions and you're like, wow, that's so bland. But
But now you
As far as
understand.
safe,
Yeah.
land is safe, right?
Yeah. Not everybody's gonna want the butterscotch topping on the vanilla ice cream, but so that's why information is king. So I mentioned yesterday that I put in a lot of my listing packets and I make them available online because you've got to be careful what you say here. So
I like how this one says Roger ATV from the door.
right.
Like, right in the alley, but I just happened to notice that. I was like, oh, interesting.
Half the trails you can't write it on them, but you can write it on your front walk.
Yeah.
So it's-
You can do circles, it's okay.
Yeah.
A good example of the small house, let's just talk about that for a minute, and the vague was a good word, vague in general. But think about a small house. Who could it be for? It could be for someone just leaving mom and dad's basement and getting their first home. It could be for somebody whose kids have just finished college and they want a smaller home. It could be for someone who just became widowed. You know, it could be, what I'm saying is it could be for any stage of life. And that's why you have to be vague and inclusive is the word in your wording. It's not an easy job to do that, because you want to put all those Roget's thesaurus things in there and wonderful adjectives, and then you're catching yourself with this list, which is going to be a great reference.
Question.
Yes.
Can you say walkout basement?
Yeah, because that's an actual term.
It's
I
a-
now MLS will probably kick it out.
Because of the specific word
No,
walk.
because you could actually have like a wheelchair lift. You could, like,
Yeah.
seriously. So don't.
I mean, I know in Naren, and I think it's in MLS Pin. It asks you for types, and you can check off, and that's one of the things you can check off. But I would leave it out of the
Yeah,
description.
Gotta
yeah.
change it, right?
So,
That's interesting.
so we. I don't know about you guys, but I know I hear all the time people complaining about, oh, the MLS is always changing this or they're always changing that. Well, you know what? We're gonna have to start using the features and amenities of the homes to help combat some of this risk. The other thing is on page 8, it does talk about license suspension, just so you know. So in Massachusetts, your first offense, it's a 60-day suspension, or a minimum of 60 days, and your second suspense is 2 years, up to 2 years with a minimum of 90. So. All right, so what do we got with this one here? Let's look at the second sentence, actually.
Sipping coffee on the lovely enclosed front porch. What if I don't drink coffee?
No, that's not a protected class. Remember that the protected classes are the.
They got starter and retirement.
Yeah, that's going in. But that second sentence, if you want to spice it up, I guess that's one way to do it, right?
Yeah.
And then, yeah, going on to the third sentence, it says great starter home or retirement home. I mean, it's a 1-bedroom. I mean,
Yeah. So now you're shooting down everybody in the middle.
right.
Could you have put in what they're using the home as an engineering office? Is that acceptable?
Well,
That's
that's
actual-
fine. I wouldn't personally do that because,
That's personal, isn't it? It may
well,
not be advertising.
I
no,
think they probably did it so when people come see it, they're like,
They understand.
what is going on here?
And that's a conversation to have with your client is what
So
can I and can I not disclose? Is this an acceptable terminology for me to use? Are you okay with me sharing this?
and it's important to know your areas that you work. So in Dunbarton, New Hampshire, I had a buyer buying a house. The listing bragged about this beautiful finished basement with a bathroom. It had a full size window. It was a walkout basement, had a bedroom added. 10 days before closing, the town tax assessor came and knocked on the door of the sellers and said, congratulations on selling your house. It looks beautiful on the online. Notice that it has an extra bedroom and bathroom downstairs that's not on the tax card. And they had 2 choices. They could pay a hefty fine and rip it out, or pay a heftier fine and leave it in. And my buyers got the house they bought the way they saw it, and the sellers had to bring a check to closing. So, so if you put in something in the description, just keep in mind that there's eyes watching, and if you're in a town with a very aggressive tax assessor, it could, I mean, if this is actually zoned commercial,
Yeah.
but if this wasn't zoned commercial, and then you put in there that they're using it as a home office,
I listed a home, right in this same town, and the sellers were insistent that I listed as a 4-bedroom. It was on the field card as a 3, and I said, this is how it's gonna play out, which is exactly how it played out. So we got great offers, everything went smooth, until the fire department came out and said, you have this listed as a 4-bedroom. He actually checked the listing and wouldn't issue the smoke cert. So they had to rip out something in the downstairs bedroom. I mean, it was like a fiasco last minute, and
yeah.
I was like, all right. But I was prepared, and
Well, and you told them, this is how it's gonna go if we
You
do
might
it
have to
your
rip
way.
out the closet, yada, yada, yada.
So
Wow.
if you don't have these stories, you now do that you can share when you get that pushback from somebody that's saying, well, I know the tax card says it's only a 2-bedroom, but it's 3. You can share these stories, say, look, I understand what you're saying. However, in the past, this is some things that have happened. Not saying it'll happen this time, but it could. Also, just so that everybody knows, when you're looking at what constitutes a bedroom, what is a HUD definition of a bedroom?
A closet
And
and
an
an window.
egress. Gotta have a form of, you gotta, on that level, you gotta have a form of egress.
So we have form of egress, closet,
Doorway.
window, doorway. Okay. According to the HUD guidelines, or FHA, excuse me, not HUD, FHA guidelines, the room has to be 90 square feet. It has to have a full-size window, or a window that a firefighter can get in and out of. That is it.
Oh, closet's not one.
It does not have. No, the bedroom hasn't. You have to have a doorway to get in, but especially here in New England, we have a lot of the rooms off of rooms that doesn't have like a hallway. Those count as well as a. So I've seen plenty of homes with a 90 square foot walk-in closet with a window.
Does it have to be one or the other, or both?
No, just one or the other. But you're not going to have a room without a door.
Well, yeah, I'm saying like 90 square feet or a full-size window.
Oh no, you have to have both because the window is so that there's a way to get in and out.
I feel like in lots of split-level homes, though, those bedrooms downstairs
Oh.
are all.
So we're gonna go off fair housing for a second. Split level homes. I'm sorry. This is a pet peeve of mine. A split level home, the bottom floor does not count in your finished square footage. It is not part of it. So
Even finished, completely finished.
even completely finished, there's still value to it. There is still value, absolutely. However, it's not rated as an appraiser would not go in there and say, okay, it's 2,400 square feet. No, it's 1,200 square feet above grade.
That's right.
And then 1,200 square feet below grade. The difference is, in my area, above grade, you're looking at about $121 a square foot. Below grade, you're looking at about 36. So that's and it's a huge, because the appraiser, if they go and they're trying to do comps and they have a split level that are identical and one says 1,800 and one says 36, they can't use that one that says 36 because it's beyond their scope of variance. So
Can you add that description though in the remarks?
well, you
Because I
can,
see
but
that
in
sometimes.
MLS PIN,
Yeah.
yeah.
Not in
As
square
long
foot.
as it's about the disclosure, you gotta disclose it.
Yeah.
Right, and in the MLS, there's 2 different places for square footage. One is the above grade or living area, and the other one is total finished. Total finished can include basement. Total living area cannot. Total living area is calculated by the outside measurements minus a garage. So if you have a 20 by 20 square foot house on the outside dimensions and you don't have a garage, that's 4,000 square foot house. Why is it square foot? But it's 4,000, so it should be feet, right?
It sounds wrong though.
Yeah.
Square feet.
Yeah. Square feet house.
Yeah. So I don't know if that makes you feel warm and fuzzy or not, but
Fuzzier.
yeah. I mean, I know that I get a lot of pushback from people on that because everybody, they're fully finished. You're only walking down half a set, or the back's a walkout.
Yeah. Right.
It's still the.
Do you still want us to wait till the end for questions, because I have another question?
Oh no, go ahead.
It's interactive.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not very.
So on a walk-up attic that's finished, could you call that a bedroom?
Yes, it's above grade.
It is.
So now, if you're dealing with a cape, I would go by what the tax card says. I don't want to be the engineer to make that determination. Some tax cards will say, okay, it's 2/3, counted as 2/3, or counted as, a half. So whatever they say on the tax card, that's what I prefer, because you have choices. You can say you measured it, municipal, other, do municipal, cover your butt.
Usually the septic, if there's a septic too, they tell you it goes by the bedroom.
Yes,
Yeah.
so if they put
So
another
that's-
bedroom. then-
Back to
Yeah.
Renee's example, and in the house that she had, when I'm meeting with the sellers, I always press them to go by what's on the public records card, because the appraiser is gonna look at that also. But let's say there was a fourth bedroom that can't be called a bedroom. Back to your acceptable words and written description. You can put that in your written description and say, possible playroom, office, or something, just so that they know
Bonus
that there's
one,
another
yeah.
room
Yeah.
that can be used for something else. Just so that you don't say 4-bedroom home and
Plus you get into an issue with tax assessment, permits. I mean,
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
it could be, you could be opening up a can of worms.
it's interesting that the town person was checking on it. I had the exact opposite happen. I went to list a house in Chelmsford, and it said in the public record 2 bathrooms. So I had the owner, the woman's husband had died. The owner walks me through the house, and I kept saying, where's the second bathroom? She says, what are you talking about? So I showed her. Her husband had pulled a permit to build a second bathroom, and then had gotten sick and died and never did it. So it ended up, I said to her, go to the town. She got an abatement for being taxed for the second
That's good.
bathroom. So that's the opposite, but
Yeah,
look at what the town says.
So going on bathrooms for a second. One, bathrooms did change recently. Prior, it used to be if there was a 3/4 bath. There's no 3/4 bath now. It's either a full bath or a half bath. If you have 3 or more of the features, it's a full bath. Features being a tub, a shower, a vanity, or a stool. Okay, so if you have 3 of those, then you have a full bath. Also, along the same lines, I went to show a house in Raymond, New Hampshire. Said that it had 2 bathrooms. Looked all through the house, couldn't find the second bathroom. Asked the listing agent. Pointed outside, there was an outhouse. I said no. He counted it. I can tell you the town didn't count it. But
Interesting.
it was an old outhouse, so I guess if we can be creative. I don't think so, but anything wrong with this listing?
There's no.
Oh, boy.
So I guess they didn't violate anything. I just threw that in there.
Now, why would someone do that? Why would someone just not? Is that just
Maybe
pure
in a hurry or
laziness
just get it
or
Well, how about entry only? They put
True.
very little.
or little to nothing?
Mhm.
If you're lucky if you get anything out of them.
I'm gonna say because it was a pocket listing that
Oh, they probably, yeah.
because it was the same agent that bought and sold it. So
Yeah.
all right.
Owner had removed all sheetrock, plaster, and insulation from the walls. Ooh, that could be tricky right there. You're throwing yourself under the bus for something potentially.
So it is down to the framing.
The electric wires. What does it say about the electric? I can't.
Oh, it says electric wires have been installed. I'm sorry, guys.
The
I
hard
don't.
part has been done. It's already ready.
Well,
There's a whole lot wrong with this. I feel like.
So they haven't violated any protected
It's just
classes,
free renovation or
but
would you be able to get a mortgage on that?
Right, exactly.
maybe you can get a 403k.
Well,
A
the
renovation.
other thing is looking at the year built and where they're saying they've removed all sheetrock, plaster, and insulation. If there was lead paint, did you have it remediated when you did that?
Or
Which is-
properly removed.
Which-
Oh, yeah, for
it's
properly
probably
removed.
gone. Yeah.
Which could
So
be a
that
can
may
of
be a
worms.
state, were the proper permits pulled
Yeah.
type thing. Just curious, anybody in here, when you have a new listing, do you go down to town hall and pull the permits to verify them? Anybody?
I don't.
Should we?
I can't answer
I
that
had
question.
the-
I don't.
I had the
It's really up to the buyer.
I had the seller show me copies of
Yeah.
permits
Do you?
in a folder, so I had them on the counter for when people.
I always ask the seller if he pulled permits for the, like you were just asking about the walk-up attic and the finished bedroom. I would want to know, did you pull a permit to have that work done?
Well, it's one of the questions on the disclosure. Do you have any non-permitted work done?
Yeah.
Mm.
But, all right, what else we got here? So, sorry. How do I? What happened to the one I just had on? I love this listing, but it would not meet. It would not meet the criteria for MLS PIN, and that's why I love it. Because it says lot has mature trees.
Yeah.
So I think you're talking about people.
Right. So the AI on MLS PIN doesn't know or doesn't read it in the context. All it's going to see is mature.
Oh, right, right.
But that could. So what's some other things you could use as far as that? Because timber's expensive. I mean, there could be value there.
Potential logging.
Potential logging.
How about established landscaping? I don't know.
Established.
Established is a good one.
Yeah.
Established.
Pristine hardwoods. I mean, I don't. So that was the only thing with this one here is the fact that they use mature trees.
Has anyone had an instance where the seller wanted to write their own description?
Yes.
No.
I had a tech writer, and he said, "Do you mind if I write it?" And I'm like, "Not at all." Of course, then you have to check it for the acceptable words, but
So has anybody heard of the app Fiverr?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. It's a great, for those who don't know, you can find somebody to do anything for you, just about. And it's usually fairly reasonable. They do have professional copywriters. You can hire fairly cheap. I mean, $35 to write a description that's gonna just keep you out of hot water. And that's written by somebody that does this for a living.
I didn't know they did that too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you can find like little odd-man jobs.
Oh yeah.
People will build you logos, like all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, that's how I got my.
What's the
logo.
app called?
It's called Fiverr. F-I-V-R. R?
F-I-V-R.
I think it's two R's.
Yeah.
No E.
Oh, thanks.
So, because I know that it's hard. I mean, for me, it's hard to try to be descriptive without violating.
Using English.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually use a Latin teacher to do my,
Really?
yeah.
Oh.
She hasn't got me in trouble yet. But while we're on that subject, let's go to Code of Ethics. Yeah, because you can all read that, right? Yeah.
Yep.
So basically in the Code of Ethics, it says that we are responsible to maintain fair housing and do all that. It also says that if we have anybody that does it for us, an admin, or we hire somebody, we are responsible for what they do.
They do tell me. Because they're representing us, so.
Yes,
It's your job to educate them and tell them how to do their job, essentially.
exactly. At the end of the day, it's on you. So what are some other words that we see all the time that maybe, I don't know if you guys see it down here, but there's certain areas in Manchester that are very heavy Catholic. And so every now and then somebody will put in part of whatever parish.
You're signaling out. I mean, you're singling out a religion,
Right.
and that's
Right.
a protected class.
Yeah.
But
That's
to
a
the
big one. Why would I? Yeah.
because some people don't think about it that way, because they're not thinking of it as they're discriminating. They're thinking it as a selling feature for somebody that's looking to be in that area. And so it happens in Missouri a lot too. Like there are whole towns in Missouri. Not that we're in Missouri, but just saying there are places in the country where they're all that particular religion. Same thing, Utah, same way. So you would think that, okay, well, this would be helpful, but
That's like even if you were selling property in the North End, you say Great Italian Neighborhood.
oh yeah, you just can't, you know. You know, if you're in Boston, you say Great Southie
Yeah.
Tradition. I don't know that would work.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of confusion over what we can say to people when asked about, you know, the property. What are the schools like? We talked about this yesterday. Be the source of the source.
Yeah.
I had a couple, you know, if you guys haven't noticed, you're going to start seeing snowbirds are moving back. People retired, went down south, and now they're realizing, hey, we don't want to see our kids, but we want to see our grandkids.
So true.
And our kids aren't bringing them to see us.
That's
So they're
true.
moving back.
Yeah.
So I had a couple want to buy a condo. I was very familiar with the condo association. They said, are there any people our age? Now, if you have a chance, Google Sadler selling system.
Selling.
Fantastic training. If you can find any of the stuff on YouTube for free, watch it. I grew up in a household where my dad was like a Sadler. I mean, the guy started in the 70s and 80s, but it wasn't 70s and 80s techniques. Like, it wasn't the high pressure stuff. It's amazing. So one of the things he teaches is if somebody asks you a question, reverse it, because whatever they're asking is probably not the question, and the only time you ever answer a direct question is if they ask it twice in the identical way. So they said, Eric, you know, are there any people our age? I said, that's a great question. Why do you ask? Well, we just find that when we were down in Florida, a lot of the people our age were no fun to hang out with. So had I immediately said, oh yeah, the people across the hall are your age, or the
True,
people
yeah.
upstairs or
They were
whatever,
looking for
I may have been
Yeah.
right. So finding out that they wanted 20-year-old 70-year-olds as opposed to 70-year-old
Yeah.
70-year-olds helped me to be able to say, now, can you answer that question though if somebody asks you? Most of the time people say no. The answer is yes. If you are specifically asked a question that you know the answer to, you can absolutely answer it.
So if they say, are there kids in the neighborhood? You can say yes.
You
But how
can.
would you, yeah. Well,
I
how do
would-
you know how would you know the answer to that anyway? I mean,
Well, if you're
How
driving
you
through
know
the
the
neighborhood and
age?
Wow.
there's kids walking
no,
their dog.
not the kids. I mean,
Oh.
like the ages of neighbors, unless it's a 55 and over community or something. But you really do know the ages
I
of the
did.
neighbors?
I did because
Yeah.
I mean, I take an active role in certain communities, so I know. If I didn't know, I would say, I really don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the
Say
question
that.
we can stop by and ask the property manager what that is, and they can answer. But I knew the answer. I had
knew
sold
the
the one
answer.
across the hall and the one upstairs, so I was able to tell them, oh yeah, the people across the hall, they're your age, but they like to play cribbage and no, they were more cribbage. You know anybody that plays cribbage?
No,
My
my husband did.
No, okay.
I don't even know what cribbage is.
I like cribbage.
So I sold a house in Chelmsford, and the owner of the house said to us that the day before he had thought he had an offer on it, and the prospective buyers did a drive-through of this beautiful neighborhood and saw a hockey net across the street and decided that there must be kids that lived across the street, and they decided they didn't want to live on that street. So there's the opposite.
Yeah.
She got a ring.
Yeah. That's
So-
true.
Right, so, you know, a lot of times, most of the time, the answer is going to be, you know, I'm not quite sure. Maybe you want to drive by at different times of the day to see what's going on in the area. But if you do know the answer, you can absolutely answer it, but don't make it up. Makes sense. Let's cover 55 and over and 62 and over properties real quick. So 55 and over, does anybody want to know what the reasoning behind that was?
That you can't put that in there, 55 and over?
You can.
Yeah. They
The
say
way it was
for-
established, or the reason it was established, was because just because it's a 55 and over community doesn't mean that somebody under 55 can't live there. However, let's say you've got spouse A is 62 and spouse B is 53. They can live there. If spouse A dies and spouse B is still 52 or 53, whatever, they can't kick her out or them out. I'm trying to be gender neutral
Right,
here.
right.
So they can't kick that person out. But if you were in a 62 and over community and you had somebody that was 62 married to somebody 59, they may not even be able to buy the house. 62 and over is hard
Very
line.
strict.
Yeah, 55 and under is less. Now, you have to check the communities too, because some of them have different bylaws.
I was just gonna say.
Some of them
that.
go by
They're all
percentage.
different, yeah, yeah.
But the intent behind setting up the 55 and over was not so that you could have 60% of the homes occupied by 55 and over and 40% under. That wasn't the intent of the
Yeah,
the
they're
law.
all different.
And when you're listing one of those, make sure you understand the rules or read the rules of it. There's a complex in North Chelmsford. The owner had a daughter who got a divorce, and so she moved back in with mom, even if it was temporary. The association told her she could only be there for 30 days. So you can have a guest, underage, meaning under the 55 and all, for 30 days, but that's it, no longer. So
Yeah.
when you're portraying a
tricky.
condo listing in a 55 older or 60s who are older, whatever, make sure you understand the specific rules of that association, because they can be different from place to place. And especially if there are the percentage of affordable housing as well.
I have one in Florida that's a 55 and over, and that's the same thing. But I had, to have my sister and brother-in-law stay there, I had to put them as occupants if they wanted to go, but they could only stay so long. It's like 30 days, and
So it's almost like
it's
you
very,
register
very,
them.
very strict. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the same thing. I think you had the oldest. If I had a son or somebody 18 years old, had to be 18, no children at all. Yeah.
You know what I'm hearing? I'm hearing that it sounds like it's a lot of work to be a realtor. You have to know a lot.
No, really, yeah.
If you wanna do it right, yeah.
You have to know your property.
Oh.
Yeah, really.
Yeah. We kind of talked about that a little bit yesterday too, with Article 11 of the Code of Ethics.
Yeah, knowing your property in the area.
Yeah. So, what are some other outreach? So schools we talked about, right? If somebody comes to you and says, I want to live in a Hispanic neighborhood.
I got nothing for you.
Say, well, I don't have that option in my, well, don't you know the area? You've got to handle it diplomatically. I mean, it'd be great if we could just say, oh, we can't do that. But they're not going to accept that for an answer, right? So you've got to be prepared and know what you're going to be saying to go forward with it. So, Mr. and Mrs. Byer, I can appreciate you wanting to be that. I honestly, I don't look at what that demographic is or what that type of demographic is in a neighborhood. All I look at is the homes, the conditions, and the price point. So
They would have to do their own research.
right. So that I would suggest you go to, Google it. Just Google the area and find out where you want to be, and I'll gladly customize a search that geographic area for you, but I need you to identify it for me. I can't do that.
So you're putting it on them essentially.
Yeah, it's on
Right.
them. They can
Now, if they come
decide.
back and say, hey, I only want to be between Pine and Ash and First and Second, then set them up for a search that way.
Right.
That's not you limiting them, that's them limiting them.
They want to be specific.
Right.
So I have a question. So like if you have a client and like they want to live in one specific town because it has a great school system, they already live there, maybe they just want a bigger house, whatever. But they say, I don't want a specific type of neighbor ethnicity wise. How do you handle that? Especially if this ethnicity is high in population in this town. How do you deal with that in a correct way? Like, how do you explain to them like that it doesn't work like that?
So
what is
we
this
have a
what
one
you said?
sheet through NAR. You can get a one sheet of the Code of Ethics. I also have that in my
One sheet.
Your packets.
on my packets. And I actually, if that comes up, I'll go back and say, now remember, I have to work by a Code of Ethics, and unfortunately for you in this circumstance, I don't pay attention to that type of demographic. Just like I said before, I don't pay attention to that type of demographic. I'm forbidden to, and honestly for me it's not an issue, so I don't know. I guess if you want to know what the neighborhood composes of, probably drive by at different times of the day, or even knock on the door and just introduce yourself and say, hey, I'm thinking about buying this house, what do you think of the neighborhood, and be non-confrontational that way.
Yeah.
And that's how I would handle it, because you can't, if they tell you, I don't want to be on this street or that street, that's fine.
Yeah.
If they say, I don't want to live next to a Canadian, well, sorry about that. So,
Well, at what point?
thank you.
And at what point can you, like, I mean, I guess, you know, some realtors may be just even uncomfortable with the fact that their clients are very specific in that sense. Like, to some degree, that's.
Do you have to work with everybody that
Well, and
comes
so
to
that's what I'm saying. Like, how do you politely tell them, like, I just think that we're seeing things differently. I don't think I'm the realtor for you.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, I appreciate that. Do you have a referral that you could send me to somebody you know?
Mhm, right, yeah.
I mean, I have no problem turning somebody over that, because let's face it, we're human beings, right?
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Yeah,
So
oh, yeah.
I may not be, and I'm not a good fit for a lot of people, and I have no problem. One of my good friends, super aggressive. I'm not going to call somebody 3 times a day, but if that's what they need to feel like they're being appreciated, I'm going to say, you know what, I'm not going to give you the level of service you're looking for. I don't want you unhappy. I know this agent here who will meet that need for you. Can I make an introduction and then pass it off?
But these rules also apply to licensed real estate agents that are not realtors.
Correct.
The code of ethics is different.
Yeah.
Code of ethics only applies to
Realtors.
But yes, that's a great point. And we're going to go over that on Monday when we do code of ethics. Code of ethics is, in my opinion, my favorite class. It's so much fun. I don't sit there and we read through Article 1, Article 2. We have like a little scenarios, and I have my own slides, and we go through all of them. And so you guys have been awesome and very interactive already in the first 2 days, so I really appreciate that. Makes it go a lot
I
smoother.
have a question.
Yes.
Can you go over the owner-occupied multifamilies and the differences in the exemption from federal law and all that?
Okay. So the federal law is 4 units. Massachusetts is 2. So if you have an owner occupied with 2 units, that owner, if not using a licensed real estate professional, can say, I don't want any French Canadians. And they're perfectly within their right to do that. If they have 3 units, they cannot do that.
In Massachusetts.
In Massachusetts, yeah. In Massachusetts, if it's 3 or more, they have to abide by all these
But
rules.
2 they can.
2, and they live there.
Yeah, the owner occupied 2
Yeah.
units.
Now, every once in a while, I'll get some pushback from somebody in class saying, well, they have to be on the first floor. I've never seen anywhere, and when I looked at the law, there was nothing there that said first floor occupant. It just said that they had to be owner occupied, so. Does that cover it?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
New Hampshire is 4.
New Hampshire's 3.
Oh, New Hampshire,
Federal is 4. So,
Federal
I mean,
is 4.
Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
across the-
But each, I mean, as you can see, just in these 2 states, it's less. So my guess is a lot of states are less, but I don't know.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, really, that's it. Who did the agency? Yeah, the homework.
Well, I printed out the forms and I didn't actually sign.
I forgot there was homework until I looked at today somewhere.
I did all the forms, but I wasn't
So
sure
she
where-
did it.
I wasn't